next black bar. When does that black bar hit that one? And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. It's 20 187-year cycles. That's 20 multiplied by 68,302. That's 1,366,040 days. And that was a number worshipped by the Mayas of Central America. Now, do you see the problems? Okay? This is a mosaic sun shield from Monte Alban in Mexico. It's a sun shield. It has 4 arrows. It has 85 golden loops or sunspots, and it has 11 pendants. 4 times 8 times 11 multiplied by 365.25 comes out to be 1,366,040 days. So now you know what you're up against. We know what we're up against. These guys weren't the chimpanzees flying around in trees eating bananas like the archaeologists tell us. These people were smarter than we are today. And if we look at the sunspot graphs, we understand why civilizations rise and fall with sunspots, because we know sunspots affect fertility. We know how they affect fertility. They affect the particles coming off the sun. That affects the brain. That affects the production of hormones. So every time we get a sunspot cycle, the pharaohs died out. The early Greeks died out. When we have a maximum, we have a pyramid maximum. The Mayas died out in AD 750. We had the Incas died out in 1530. All because the sun failed their fertility needs. There were no babies being born. Not only were there no babies being born, but when that magnetic field reverses, when that neutral warp reverses, what happens to the sun? Well, we can see what happens. If the sun's magnetic field goes that way, if it twists on its axis like that, the Earth turns on its axis upside down, and we have a pole shift. Now, of course, that doesn't happen every time. These are magnetically coupled. If that moves that way, that moves that way. If that moves that way, that moves that way. It's like a compass needle. If you've got a compass, it follows the magnetic field of the Earth. So we know the Maya, we know from that mosaic sun shield that the Maya knew the correct number for the sunspot cycle because they encoded it in that mosaic sun shield. And we need to ask, why did they worship another number 520 days longer? 1,366,560 days long. And they measure their calendar from the year 3113 BC. Because they knew in the year 3113 BC, 5,000 years ago, the magnetic field of the sun reversed. They know that. And the planet Venus reversed. The Earth did not reverse because we're further away. But they called it the birth of Venus. And that's why Venus now is rotating upside down. And it's very slow because it used to rotate that way quickly, but when it got turned upside down, it slowed down. One day it will stop and start turning the other way again. So they called it the birth of Venus. But I began to suspect as the books came along. Before we do that, I'll just show you Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu, we all know it's in the sky in Peru. And what you probably haven't seen is that, if you've been there, is that all of the windows are bricked up. There are no windows at Machu Picchu, except in the observatory. All of the windows are blocked up. So why build a window and block it up? Melatonin, the jet lag hormone, is maximum at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's dark. And 2 guys, Pierre Pauly and Riegelson, 2 Americans, doctors, wrote a book in 1999, The Melatonin Miracle. And they said not only does melatonin affect fertility, but electric fields decrease fertility. So if you're in Machu Picchu and you want to get rid of the electric fields, what do? You earth bond all of the stones in the building to short circuit the electrical energy to ground. And this is why all the stones at Tiwanaku in Bolivia and in Peru have these copper straps in the concrete, in the enchased blocks. So during the Inca minimum, they had a sunspot minimum. And when we have sunspot minimums, we have a mini ice age. When we have a mini ice age, we have less evaporation of the water from the oceans. So why didn't everybody in the world die out when we had a sunspot minimum? Because around the equator, around Mexico and Peru, either side of the equator, they had less melatonin and less fertility. It was a sunspot maximum, so we had more X-rays coming off the sun, so we had more spontaneous fetal abortion from the X-rays. X-rays are dangerous if you're pregnant. We had a sunspot minimum, so there was less rain. Globally, all around the world. But in equatorial regions, it was more crucial. So that the people around the equatorial region had famine as well as drought. Okay, who cares? Who cares? Well, this, as I said, this stuff is very, very important. In 1967, a British biologist, Janet Harker, wanted to know, how does a cockroach know when it's midnight? How can it get out of bed at midnight, run around for 6 hours, and then get tired again and go back to bed? So what she did was, she got a cockroach on an electron microscope, she put it to sleep with a little bit of chloroform, she cut its head off with an electron microscope and a scalpel, she put a grid on top of the cockroach, with 100 little grids in it, and she got a little soldering iron, and she burnt a hole in one of the squares and put its head back together. Next day, got up at midnight. Next day, she got a different cockroach, and she burnt out the next square. And she did this over and over again, and eventually she reached a part of the brain which, when she burnt it out, it didn't wake up at midnight, and it didn't go to bed. It just ran around continuously. So she said, that must be the biological clock. She said, how can I check? So she got an Australian cockroach and she flew one in. And she put his clock in the English cockroach, and she put the English clock in the Australian's cockroach, and they both went to bed at the opposite time. So she said, it must be the clock. And then she said, I wonder what will happen if we put 2 clocks in one cockroach. So she put 2 clocks in one cockroach. And every time they got cancer and died. Okay, so let's have a look what's going on. Here we have the sun. The sun's giving out radiation, don't forget. And there's 4 patterns of radiation. This diagram shows the pattern 1, 2, 3. In other words, this particular month, number 4 was burned out. So we have this rhythm, this beat, a 1, 2, 3 beat. 1, 2, 3. So this sperm and the egg, they come together, and the sun is showering 1, 2, 3 on this particular baby, on this particular fetus or zygote. This sperm, as it enters the egg, and it starts developing and dividing its cells. And the baby starts developing cells as it's radiated by this sunshine with a 1, 2, 3 beat. The cells grow, the cells divide, more cell growth. The hormone systems develop. The hormones then feed a signal back to the biological clock. And the biological clock says, 1, 2, 3. Good, it's great. And it compares the 1, 2, 3 from the hormone system with the 1, 2, 3 from the sun. And it says, are they together? Yep, great. Okay, the sun goes around again, and the sun says, more cells. So the cells divide, and they go around, and there's no problem, great. And the organism grows a bit bigger, they get more hormones, more cells, and it grows and grows and grows. So we have a parity checker in the brain, the pineal gland, to make sure that they're both, we don't want that. We want them both together, the same code, because we know we've got a healthy baby. What happens if we change the code? Look at this situation. We have the same code coming from the sun, 1, 2, 3, but now you've got a carcinogen coming into the system. Coffee, tobacco, any carcinogen that changes its metabolic rate. Now we've got 1, 2, 3 from the sun here, but the carcinogen's going, hey man, this cigarette's making me go really quickly. And the other one's going like that, and they say, and what happens is this comparator doesn't switch off the system. And what happens is we get a cancer loop forming. And so we get cancer the